everyone. Hi. My name is Keskora Yaari, and I'm here to present to you today Wormhole Space from scratch. Now, EVE Online is truly one of the most immersive and really just engaging game experiences out there, and nothing really exemplifies this quite like Wormhole Space. There's no Concord, there's no local, there are no gates. And so you really just are freed from all your restrictions and also all of the crutches you normally have to really just experience all the potential that the game has to offer. We kind of say it's like the Wild West of New Eden, the final frontier. Har har. But you really just get to go out there and make all your fortunes or die trying, often repeatedly. But really also what's so great about Wormhole Space is really at its core, you find some of the most amazing, committed, and really just quality players out there, from people who survive through all of the unknown and all the chaos that really goes into surviving Wormhole Space. So, there's so much out there that a lot of people haven't ever explored. You just gotta kind of jump in there, just get going. And just, make sure that you bookmark the exit. That's all I have to say. So, a little bit about me. My name is Keskora Yaari. I'm the CEO of POS Party with the Ember Sands Alliance. I started playing EVE in February of 2014. I started out in high sec, like most people do. And I was getting really tired of getting constantly war decked and people always knowing where I was to come and kill me in my horrible salvaging Noctis that I never fly anymore. And so I decided I really wanted to do something different. I wanted something really a big change. And so I thought, let's try this whole wormhole thing, really for no other reason than it just sounded cool. And so I just jumped right in. I had 2 million skill points to my name, really no prior knowledge of EVE at all, and decided I'm just gonna do this. So 2 months later, just went right into it. And I joined this Corp called POS Party, which, just gonna throw this out there, I did not pick the name. People ask us, well, now that POSes are gone, what are you gonna do? And we've thought, well, we could do Fortizar Fiesta, or Structure Soiree, which is actually in the Alliance now, or Citadel Shindig is another good one. But, at this point, it's almost like a legacy name that we kind of have to just have pride in because of how horrible it is. But ultimately, we started really small. It was about 5 members, CEO, me, my husband, and 2 other dudes or something. And we had one really horribly defended POS that we called Ember, hence the Ember Sands name that we came up with eventually. And we were just kind of going about our own business, having fun. And then the CEO decided he was going to leave after 2 months and put me in charge. So I had no experience in the game at all, let alone in Wormhole Space, and I was like, okay, we're just gonna make this work. I'm just gonna, put on my big girl pants, and I'm gonna make this happen. So I figured out very quickly that Wormhole Space is really EVE hard mode. Just the amount of logistics you have to do. There's no easy access to just hop into JITA and get what you need. Sometimes it takes a long time to haul stuff. You have small mass to be able to not fit a whole lot of stuff in the wormhole at any given time. Having the motivation to do all this every day, to just know that there's a lot of stuff you gotta do and you just have to get it done, and it's not just gonna happen on its own. There's a lot of security issues in Wormhole Space. People are really easy to sneak AWACSers and spies in there. You gotta really make sure you take care of all that, as well as you have to have a lot of trust in your members. You have to have a really strong team to be able to make it in Wormhole Space. But it's by overcoming all these obstacles that you really build the core of your group and end up, being a successful group in Wormhole Space. So the first thing you really have to establish in Wormhole Space is you really need to have a home. The home of a wormholer is really the whole center of your world. Everything you do starts and ends in your home. So you really want to make sure that you have the right home to fit you, your members, and your play styles. And that really comes down to 2 really important factors, which are the class of the wormhole and the static connections of that wormhole. And then also of the effect, wormholes have different effects, and sometimes that can play a really big factor as well, but it's somewhat more of just a personal preference. So Wormhole classes are divided from class 1 all the way scaling up to class 6, and they get progressively harder as you go up. So class 1, class 2, and class 3 are considered low class. C5 and C6 are high class, and I'm making the argument that C4 are considered middle class. Yes, it does, shut up. So my argument behind this is that in low class and in high class, there's two really defining characteristics, and that is that low class always have a case-based static. You always know that you'll have some direct connection to some form of known space. High class, you can fit capitals through the connections, which I think is the defining characteristic of those. C4s can do neither, so therefore middle class. There you go. So ultimately, the low class and the high classes have kind of different mentalities. Low class, again, has those guaranteed case-based connections. They offer more security with those because you always know that you can get in and out of your connection. However, the downside is that they don't make as much ISK as the higher class connections. But I guess to trade off, if you like PvP, there's a lot of traffic that comes in and out of those case-based connections. Now, high class have more mass in their connections, where you can fit capital ships and freighters through. But because of that, they have a little bit less security. You're deeper in the chain, it's not easy to get in and out, and people can bring capitals into you, as well as you getting them to other people. So it also leads to bigger fights, which is one of the really big things that a lot of people like about high class. You can get those capital fights that you don't see in the lower classes. And you can make lots and lots of ISK, which is what really draws a lot of people to Wormhole space. Now, static connections are sometimes almost considered to be really more important than the class because it determines what kind of chain you have in your wormholes as well as what kind of traffic you see. So it determines what kind of content you get, which is really the most important part of wormhole space is getting content. So you have to kind of decide when you want to choose a hole if you want to use the statics more or rely more on your home hole. And that counts for PvE. We lived in a C2 static when we first started. Can't really do much in the home hole except for use it as a base of operations. But a lot of people in the high classes use their home hole to make a lot of ISK in their home sites. Some people, though, just use the statics to roll to see what kind of new connections they can get on a day-to-day basis to get more content. Then, of course, you have to think of, well, who are you going to run into when you start rolling those connections? Ever since we moved to a C4 class now, we have a C5 static and run into a lot of bigger groups up in the high class space that we never really saw before when we were in the low class. And then, of course, there's the effects, which, as I said, are more of a personal preference, but they influence your strategy and your doctrines a lot more because they affect all things from defensive capabilities. Sometimes some of them make you move faster. Some have bonuses to smart bombs. They're really kind of all over the board. And a lot of people have really made their wormhole effect as like kind of a defining characteristic of their corp. But it all comes down to really just building this foundation. Once you get a really solid home, it's time to build. You got to build and build and build and build some more. Thankfully, we have citadels now, so I'll take a moment to appreciate that. When we first started, we had POSs, which were a giant mess. Security was horrible, roles were weird. And thank God, now we have citadels. Everyone has their own private hangar. Security is much less of a problem. But it's really important that you have good infrastructure. Infrastructure provides security. It provides a place for you to store all your stuff. And it is just really important because the more infrastructure you have, the more defensive your status is in wormhole space. Though I will say, a structure is not your corp. Structures die sometimes pretty frequently, and it's just, kind of part of life. Don't let that really affect your gameplay and kill your corp. You can always buy a new Astra House. Can't buy a new corp. And also, just don't underestimate how important it is to have defenses, especially with POSs. I can't tell you how many POSs we found that ran out of fuel, and we would just pop them and walk away with 10 billion ISK. Or how many POSs we'd find with absolutely no defenses on it, or citadels that are unfit, and we just walk up and attack them. Always, 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 always defend your infrastructure. But once you have your structures built, there's a couple tools you want to make sure that you have to help you on your way in wormhole space. First, of course, is a mapper. There's no gates, there's no star map. If you want to know where you are in wormhole space, you have to have a mapper. There's a whole bunch of them out there. There's more now that the in-game browser is gone, so there's just a ton of mappers out there. but it's really, really important to know where you are, what's connected to you at any given time. Then have a bookmarking scheme to go with it. Everyone in the Corp has to share bookmarks, so you need to make sure that people know where they're going, what bookmark is connected to what signature. Everyone has different bookmarking schemes. Whatever works for you is important. There's no wrong way to do it. Well, I guess there's a wrong way to do it, but there's no right way to do it. Then you also really need to have voice comms. Wormhole space is so unknown, you never know when there's going to be something happening. If you don't have good intel, a giant fleet could descend on you at any second, and you really have to have a reliable way to get a hold of your membership. You can't just rely on text. Also, having connections outside of the game is also really important because, again, someone might go off and walk around and do laundry at home, and then all of a sudden the content strikes, and they could just hop right back on if they need to, but you never know. You can't rely on there being content at any given time in Wormhole space. Then you really need to have doctrines set up and ready to go. Quick response is important in Wormhole space, but having reliable doctrines that everyone can fly is really important. But of course, in order to fund those doctrines, gotta make some ISK. Yeah, drifters. When we started out, we were primarily a PvE entity, which there's sometimes a stigma on groups that like only PvE in Wormhole space, that never give fights. But really when you're starting off, you have to be able to invest in your membership. You have to be able to build a foundation and have resources that you need so that people can buy the ships they need to fight with and to run more sites, get more ISK. And wormholes are a great resource to make ISK. ISK is everywhere. However, it is a little bit more dangerous, but usually the risk pays off. However, ships will die. I can't tell you how many PvE Tengus I've just not paid attention to, and I've double-clicked in space, floated off in the middle of nowhere, and just gotten alpha'd. And it's gonna happen, and that's okay. You just make more ISK, buy more ships, rinse and repeat. So how do you make ISK in wormholes? Well, the primary way is with combat sites. They range in difficulty depending on the class of your wormhole. For instance, a C1 combat site will net you about 12 million ISK in blue loot, which is what drops from the sleeper AI. However, going up to a C6 base, you can make 750 million ISK for one site. What?
C6 base up for rent.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, crabs for days. This is actually somewhat of a new development with regards to ISK making because there used to be escalations in high-class space that got you all this ISK, and now there's drifter battleships that spawn to give you the ISK. And it actually is kind of beneficial for the low-class guys who couldn't bring capital ships through the connections to get this ISK, but for people who live in the high class, it's actually a bit of a downgrade because it used to be for one C5 site, you can make about 585 million ISK per day for 4 days from the same site. And if you knew what you're doing, you could get it to respawn every day. So that's been changed, and there's a lot of debate on if it's good or bad, but it still doesn't change that there's a lot of ISK to be made out in wormhole space. It's really not that horrible to go out and do it. And if you can't, get a big PvP ship fleet together, gas mining. You make so much ISK in gas mining in wormhole space. From one instrumental core reservoir, which is in the C5 and C6 spaces, you can get about 300,000 ISK per gas site, and you do it in your trusty old venture. That's all you need. No crazy exhumer, no Rorqual, though, God, Rorquals can do anything now, but it's really not challenging to do. And then, of course, there's PI. Planetary infrastructure is fantastic in wormhole space. You can make really as much as you want. I can't be bothered with it. I think it's really boring, but I know some people who have this ridiculous PI enterprise that can make billions and billions of ISK a day with PI.
Yeah, it's my life.
Yeah, sure. So then there's also a lot of groups, they just straight up PvP to make their ISK. You could find enough people ratting in C5, C6, and low class, and you can just kill them, take their mods, and then there's your ISK. You don't even need to run sites. But all of this comes down to you gotta really invest in your members, not just your wallets. The membership makes the Corp. And you really have to have trust and security to bring all of you guys together to really be successful in wormhole space. And oftentimes the biggest adversaries that you'll come across are not running sites, are not getting killed, it's personal ones. But what really defines your Corp is the important part. You have to know what your play style is, what all your members like to do, how you all operate together. And this comes down to what types of ships, what size of fleets, if you PvE, if you PvP, would you like to do more, how you find your content, and just the overall personality of the people that you fly with. Because what you do in your downtime is oftentimes just as important as what you do in your active time. Because downtime can turn into active time at any minute. And also how you handle your losses. Wormhole space, a lot of people like to be risk averse. In wormhole space, it's really hard to do that successfully because you're gonna lose stuff. You're gonna get in fights, stuff's gonna die, and you just have to keep pushing forward and make more ISks, buy more ships, rinse and repeat, keep going. Because really, wormhole space is more than just a part of space. It's a lifestyle, it's a way of life. Everyone in wormhole space has this mentality that's really unique to the game itself, and you won't find anywhere else. And part of it is because our sub-community is small. We don't have a huge percentage of players that play, and so really a lot of people can make a big impact in wormhole space. We have our own internal politics, we have dramas, we have rivalries and friendships, and a lot of people all start to recognize who other people are. Because in wormhole space, you have to be active to be successful. You can't just be an F1 warrior that logs in once a week to maybe get on some kills. You have to be on there constantly. So while we might be a small percentage, we're incredibly active small percentage. Because if we don't make something happen, just nothing happens in wormhole space. And that gives like a lot of pride. I think being a wormholer is a really defining characteristic of how I play this game and what I do in this game. And I'm really proud to be a wormholer. And it also really makes us all incredibly invested in this game. We have to do a lot of stuff to make anything happen. And a lot of times when new developments happen, it affects us way differently than any other parts of space, sometimes even that the devs don't quite realize. So we always really feel like we have to be invested in this game in order to continue our way of life. And it almost kind of ends up with like a code of honor, but more like guidelines, not like a real code. Where, in wormhole space, you give fights, and you respect those who give you fights. And you try not to evict groups that also PvP, because in wormhole space, it's a small community, you kick people out, that's just less people to fight. You want more people in there to fight, more content for everybody. And also just don't be a dick. I mean, yeah, well, I'll tell you though, wormhole space remembers. So there have been personal grievances started by really stupid things, all because people are being dicks. So on that note, let's talk about evictions. So evictions happen, and it's really like the ultimate threat that most people think of, and it's the thing that keeps a lot of people even from trying wormhole space, because the thought of losing a whole bunch of what you've invested in is, it's scary. It's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of people don't want to worry about that. They like that security of having a station in the high sec that can't be just annihilated off the face of the earth. And we all know the threat's real. Everyone in wormhole space knows that there's a possibility that we could get sieged tomorrow. But it keeps us moving forward, and we keep building and just knowing that, as the more infrastructure we put in, it reduces our chances of getting evicted. And if someone does come and try to evict us, it will be the battle of the century, and we will fight to the last end, and that's part of it. And this kind of links with Citadel releases is actually, we fought to have no asset security. We originally were going to have it like the rest of K-Space, but we said no, because it's part of that ultimate risk, ultimate reward that really keeps us going. And it comes down to a lot of motivational factors. Most evictions are just to get fights. We want content. Wormhole space is all about generating content for you and your members. And evictions, a lot of times, we don't care about territory, unless you're Hard Knocks and want to own all C6 space and rent it out. But, ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't care about someone else's random C2 wormhole. I want fights, I want content, and that's what you want to do to try to get content, and sometimes is you'll ping structures. So really, it's all about that motivation. Why do people evict? It's for content. It's not for the money, it's not for the territory, though there are personal grudges, going back to not being a dick. So, ultimately, it's just no risk, no risk. It's that ultimate threat and that ultimate reward in wormhole space. And so just have your defenses, and it reduces that chance every time. But, you always gotta push forward. There's a lot of ups and downs in wormhole space. Everything comes in waves. If we were to get evicted, it would suck. I'd be sad. and then I'd rebuild. I'd move on. You got to keep going forward because everything will come and go. Activity levels will go up and down. Summer's really slow, winter's really good. Right now, everyone and their mom has like crazy work stuff going on. So you just got to keep going forward. You might lose some major combat encounters. We've all been there. We'll go in, we'll fight, we'll lose horribly. And you know what? It's okay. It's a good fight. You pick it up and you move on. We've had AWOCs and threats. I was driving to the rehearsal dinner of my wedding and getting pinged because there was an AWOCer and someone stealing all the stuff from our new wormhole we just moved in. And yeah. And so, you know, we all took care of each other. We all ran sites together, paid back everyone that lost stuff. We build up together and we move forward together. And that's really what's important, is overcoming the personal dramas, overcoming all of the obstacles to move forward. So I'm running low on time, but really I'm just gonna move forward here. Boop, 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 boop. Is at the end of the day, you gotta find your place in the wormhole landscape. Wormhole politics are real. We're a small community. And you start to recognize all the active groups and all the individuals that meet their mark. And a lot of groups, you know, a little bit, right? But you know, groups come and go, they spawn from each other. We build off each other in our community, and we have a lot of rivalries, a lot of friendships, but it all comes together in the end. And a lot of things I've learned from being CEO is that the one person you can always count on is yourself. Wormhole space, you gotta build up, you gotta move forward, and you have to be the last person to do everything you need to do. Sometimes you gotta train horrible skills. I'm like the only one with like anchoring 5 in our Corp. You gotta take care of logistics, and you have to lead by example. I try to be a positive thinker, always push forward, yeah, and I want all my guys to follow me in that respect. And that means internal and external. When people see us in the chain, I want them to know that we represent a group that will fight, that will give good fights, that won't be dicks, and just want to have a good time. And also, you can't take everything personally. You know, there's a lot of trolls out there, all over the place. I've been taken on by a lot. Members will come and go, and you just have to let it go. You got to let it roll off your back and keep moving forward. And ultimately, this has kind of affected a lot of things in real life for me, which is kind of cheesy to make it sound like. But I used to be really poorly self-confident, and I could never come up here and speak to you guys like this ever before. But Eve has given me a lot of confidence and allowed me to trust in myself, to have confidence in what I do, and you know, just always get back up and keep moving forward. And that's something that I never had before this silly spaceship game. And it's amazing how these things really affect you, because you know, Eve friendships are real friendships. And I've grown a lot as a person because of these people that I've met in wormhole space. So I have just some important tips to leave you guys with here. Always have a rollout kit. Don't ever leave home without a mobile depot cloak and probes and a probe launcher. Never ever leave home without it. Learn how to descan. Yeah, really important, really important. Don't fly expensive implants. There's bubbles everywhere. I, in particular, like only fly bubble ships. We pod everything. Don't fly expensive implants because you're gonna get potted. Always fuel your darn structures. Can't stress this enough. And always learn your mass mechanics because it really matters. It's important. And so just a couple quotes here to finish it off. I asked a bunch of wormholers the question, what is something you know now that you wish you had known when you first started? So make wormholes what you want them to be. You can do anything at any time. Do what you want when you want. From good old Fotis over here. I wish I'd known how free I would feel with no local and how powerful I would feel stalking targets that had no idea I was there. That's crazed from upholders. Never not take the bait. It's hard to find good content creators. They're literally the backbone of a successful wormhole corp. How much history matters and how much history there really is. Woo! Steer clear of this guy. He's applied to every wormhole corp ever. Don't let this guy in, he's crazy. Scanning is content. If you expect everyone else in your corp to scan so you can have something to do, you're going to have a bad time. and always bookmark the exit. Thank you very much, everybody.